A financial disclosure filed this week shows Texas Senator Ted Cruz made $320,000 as an author in 2020. Cruz had previously reported the payment was just part of his $400,000 book advance. But according to Forbes, Cruz's campaign may have lent a helping hand to boost book sales, reportedly dropping $150,000 at Books A Million in the 3 months following the release of his book. Forbes writer Zach Everson says that politicians can use campaign money to buy their books, but they cannot receive royalties from those purchases. Cruz's spokespeople have not responded to inquiries about which book his campaign purchased. Culture editor at The Federalist, Emily Jashinsky, joins us now to discuss. Emily, welcome. What can you tell us about this Ted Cruz potentially purchasing his own books for profit?
Yeah, I'm curious for more information because it's one of these threads that's like really good to pull at, and it could genuinely lead to something very interesting. Yeah, so Ryan, I'm again interested in your perspective on this.
My hunch here, and I do think it's worth probing, is that this will wind up being more about ego than profit. Although there is an interesting relationship between the advance and the book sales, because for people that don't know the industry, an advance is an advance on royalties, and so they're guessing. Okay, we're speculating that this Ted Cruz book is going to be so popular it's going to sell X amount of books, and therefore we're going to give you the profits ahead of time, so that you can use that money to take time off to write the book, and then you have to match up your sales with that advance, or else the publisher is in trouble. And if you don't have a good agent, don't have a good contract, then you're in trouble because you actually owe money back to the publisher for poor book sales. So if those book sales were used to meet the advance, then you could wind up with a violation of campaign finance laws, because then you're using campaign money to personally profit. I suspect that he has a lawyer who's good enough that would say, no, you can't do this. But what you can do is you can use your campaign funds to drive up your own self-worth, like your own ego,
right.
And you can push the ranking of your book higher. And as you do that, it will have algorithmic benefits that then translate into more sales, which actually do translate then into personal profits. Books are often used as well by campaigns for fundraising purposes. So the campaign will buy $153,000 worth at a discount, let's say, and then sell them at $50 a pop to donors as an enticement to donate. So I suspect that some of that is what's going on as well. But there have been serious scandals in the past. The Baltimore mayor recently had to resign over a children's book thing where her allies were buying it. There were some other famous scandals where the AFL-CIO bought a bunch of I think the Speaker of the House, Democratic Speaker of the House's books back in the 70s or something. He had to resign. I don't remember the details of that, but people have in the past used books as a vehicle to kind of launder bribes.
Yeah, 100%.
I just looked this up, by the way, and his book was #1 on Amazon's bestseller list. So I guess his purchases worked.
It's like you have to spend money to make money, and that's what ends up happening. And book sales are so wonky now because the industry is adjusting to the craziness of selling online and all of that stuff. And so I suspect that Ryan's suspicions are correct, and going up in the rankings or meeting the advance deal had something to do with this more along the lines of more than profit would have. But either way, I mean, I'm very curious to get to the bottom of it. I think it's a worthwhile question to pursue.
Yeah, I mean, I don't have a problem with him buying his own book, right? I think authors do this a lot, where they will buy their books in order to make the bestseller list. And then that, of course, gives them more visibility. We see this even in, I think I've heard a rumor that even in the podcast space, you can buy advertisement. And then if you buy advertisement, they'll put you on the hot list and stuff like that. So I don't really have a problem with him buying his books back. I think the issue is his campaign did it. Now, if he took his $320,000 advance and then used half of it to buy his own book to boost the sales or to boost his visibility or his ego or whatever, that's one thing. But the fact that it was campaign dollars is so odd.
Yeah, and again, to Ryan's point, sometimes books are used as a hook for events and fundraising, and that could be the case here. That doesn't necessarily make it less sleazy, but it's at least an explanation for it. And Ryan's broader insight, I think, is really helpful, that we all notice politicians churning out these completely empty books year after year after year, and people wonder why they're doing it. And it's because, sometimes it's ego, sometimes it's they have just a lot of things they think they need to say. As we all know, that's sort of the habit of politicians, is they think everything they say is brilliant, and everyone should hear about it. But on the other hand, a lot of it is like, you can make a quick buck off it, you can get media exposure off of it, and so it's easy enough to just have some of the stuff ghost written. And I don't like Ted Cruz's books. I've actually read some of them are fairly substantive, and I don't know which one this was. But again, like, this is a question that's worth pursuing. So I'm glad that Forbes is on top of it, and I'm curious to see where it goes.
Why didn't he get a super PAC to buy the books?
Well, I think that happens too. I mean, that definitely happens, but he can't personally direct them to do that. That would be a violation. But
you can drop a hand.
Andrew Cuomo's book, he got a $5.1 million advance for that book, and you can see some of the corruption in that deal, because nobody really thinks that he's going to sell that many copies of a book on leadership by Andrew Cuomo, even without the scandal, in order to justify that type of advance. Because even his biggest fans don't necessarily want 300 pages of phoned-in musings about his leadership skills. And so they were assuming that he was going to do a bunch of touring, that he was going to, that he was going to do a bunch of bulk purchases. It's not that you're kind of writing it down in a contract, but they know, okay, this is a guy who's got, right now, $18 million in his campaign account. It's only going to grow and grow and grow. And so the publisher assumes they're going to buy a lot of copies of this book, and they're going to sell them as fundraisers. And so, in some ways, the personal profit and the campaign spending on books are intimately tied into the publishing process. And my understanding is that he's sold something like 40,000 copies. The industry is extremely opaque, and it's hard to get firm numbers. But 40,000 sales of that book for a $5.1 million advance would be a catastrophic loss for that publisher.
Terrible return on investment.
Real shame.
Yeah.
And the New York
Go ahead, Elizabeth.
The New York Times has tried to kind of keep up with this with their bestsellers list by they'll add an asterisk to people who did a bulk purchase or a bulk sale of their book when they're listing the different rankings. So it at least gives people kind of a perspective.
And they also don't tell you what bookstores they use. They have their own kind of opaque algorithm that is super secret and that is supposed to be kept away from all the other publishers, and it's only certain bookstores around the country. And so you would have to physically go to all these bookstores. And I've heard of particularly conservative organizations, because the left doesn't really have the money to do that. They'll just go to all of the bookstores that they think might be on that list, possibly, and just buy up all the books, and then give them away as fundraisers or whatever. But it's quite a mess. It's quite a mess. But Emily, thank you so much for joining us.
Thanks, guys.
And we'll have more Rising for you right after this.